He's going to update us on where we are with East West Rail, what's it all about, and what's been happening and what's around the corner. So, Beth, over to you.
Thank you all for having me this morning. And I'd like to thank Councillor Wenham and Naomi for making my job very, very easy this morning as well, because I think we have a lot in common, and I'll try not to repeat some of the things that they've said. But I just wanted to start by saying, when I looked at the slide this morning, the EEH purpose this morning, how closely it links to ours, which is connecting lives and unlocking the future, which really means for me how closely linked we are with the EEH and trying to make sure that we are delivering something across the whole of the region. This map I absolutely love to see, because what it shows to me is that it's sort of stating the obvious for why you need East West Rail. When you look at the rail map, all roads lead to London, and really, we don't have that connectivity on an East-West Rail anywhere really outside of London, certainly not in this region. And it really it demonstrates to me the importance of why this railway is important. I've got people in my team who, when they come to the office of Milton Keynes, have to go into London from their homes and come back out. And I'm sure we've all experienced that when we tried to get across the region. And it's really not a way to foster growth across the region in any way. So the importance of this railway is about trying to make sure that we are connecting people in the region, not just that all roads lead to London, and that's the only way you can get any work done. Where we are on the project, we've made a lot of progress on CS1. It's the first bit from Oxford to Bletchley and into Milton Keynes. The earthwork is complete, so all the earth moving that you will have seen is done, and we are laying track now as we speak. We are expecting to open passenger services from Oxford to Milton Keynes in 2025, and we are on track and on progress to deliver that. As Councillor Wenham said this morning, we are optimistic about hearing something, if not tomorrow, in the next few weeks about the rest of the network. I will be a bit more assertive than Councillor Wenham and say, if you have the Chancellor in your phone, please drop him a line to demonstrate how important it is to have East West Rail as part of that investment agenda going forward. I think everyone in the room knows the benefits of East West Rail, but really, as Richard was saying as well, we're trying to establish this region as a centre for growth. We are constrained in lots of parts of the region, and without really clear public transport, again, when we looked at the poll, public transport was one of the top two things that everyone in this room is looking for in terms of how do we actually deliver the growth and the importance for the region. Councillor Wenham talked about all the high growth industries that are in the region. Again, their potential could be really stifled if we don't have the connectivity. Again, there's new jobs. The jobs of the future are very likely to be in this region because of all the really exciting and different industries that are developing. And it's important that the companies see the opportunity to invest. I know that from HS2, Birmingham's had a huge amount of investment well before the first trains are running. The same thing is holding true in Bista, that the companies are investing in Bista in advance of the new network being delivered. So getting it on the front end of this, making sure that those investment opportunities are being taken advantage of is really important. Again, when you make your call to the Chancellor, express that the companies do really want to invest, and they need the signal that the railway is coming in order to do that. We've done a lot of polling. We've seen that over 70% of local residents are supportive of East West Rail as a transport connection, and all of our local authorities across the region support East West Rail, and as do lots of other stakeholder groups, so businesses, universities, and the LEPs have made their support really, really clear. One of the things that we've just really started talking about and is going to be top of my agenda as we're developing the railway is how do we really get what I'm calling the gold out of this investment. So it is about how do we work with our local authorities to get to what makes the local connectivity work, what does make in sort of enabling our stations work. This picture is, I'm slightly obsessed with pre-bickable really secure cycle storage because I think that that's something that will encourage people to cycle to the railway if they know that when they get there, their bike is going, they know where their bike's going to go and they know they're going to have it when they come back. Is that going to help people get more into active travel? I think so, but that might not be right for every community. And the important thing, and I've had these conversations with a lot of the local authorities as well, the important thing is that we are having the conversations with the local communities, and we can work with all those local communities and put some of those investments into our business case so that we can actually make sure that they are delivered. What I think is great about East West Rail is that across government, we're trying to pull together all the bits to make sure that the growth in the region happens, and not just the transport investment. There's more than a build it and they will come mentality with this railway. And I think that is going to be critical in actually delivering the benefits that we're hoping to achieve with this. Another couple things to touch on. There was a question about accessibility. We have launched our accessibility advisory panel, and we will be looking to bring representatives from our communities across the railway in to help advise us on accessibility. That's really, really important, and as well as talking about how do we become more sustainable as a railway. We are going to be looking at how do we talk to our supply chain. The way we are more sustainable is if we move less earth and pour less concrete and use less steel. So what can we do with our industry partners and our university partners to make those things really happen and come to life? Because yes, we'll do more on biodiversity net gain, but the really real objective is to do less. It will be less expensive. It will have a less, it will be done quicker, and it will have a less impact on the environment. So we're really, really keen to look at what is going on in advancing technologies and how we do those things to make sure that we have the most sustainable railway ever delivered in the country. And that's it for me. I'll join the panel. Thank you very much.
Beth. Thanks, Beth. Right, finally, let's hear from John Fox, Head of Great British Railways Capability from the Great British Railways Transition Team. Where are you, John? John's there, yes. John, give us an update. Where are we with Great British Railways, and how are you personally going to make the railways function better? Over to you. Big questions.
It's all down to individuals then. How are you going to make a difference to? Well, that's a good question to start with. John Fox from Great British Railways Transition Team. We are the government body tasked with finding a role for Great British Railways in the future of rail reform, which is a key topic, we believe, for the rail industry. I'd like this morning to give a little bit of an update to you on where we are with our development of our ideas, what it means for England's economic heartland and other regional partners, and also a little teaser of the shape of the GBR to come. So that's what I'd like to do. But I have a confession to make. First of all, I am a slideless presenter this morning, so I'd like to have a conversation with you and hopefully respond to your questions in due course. But let me start with the question of, is rail reform still alive? I guess the Mark Twain quote comes to mind. Reports of the death of rail reform have been greatly exaggerated. And why do I think that? Well, I think two reasons. First of all, the need for rail reform is as critical as ever. We see an economy, we see a rail and wider transport industry that is still recovering from the effects of COVID. Our revenue, our income is still plateaued, I think it's fair to say, at around 85% of pre-COVID levels. And we're seeing rates of growth in unit costs, which this morning you heard as well as I did, I'm sure, that inflation has hit 11.1% and will continue for some time at that level. So if you do the math, as the Americans would say, then there is a growing chasm potentially in the coffers that can come and pay for the future of the railways. So we have a need to do something in reform. And secondly, I would observe, and we'll see more this week, won't we, when government sets out its fiscal statement and then begins to put together its legislation programme, I do believe that we have a ministerial team which is quite focused and engaged and certainly experienced in the transport sector. If you look at the new ministerial team, the need for briefing, one hopes, will be much less than perhaps with previous ministerial teams, however long they last. We see Hugh Merriman, chair of the Transport Select Committee, who certainly has been very well informed, knows his onions, you may say, when it comes to railways, and has been a supporter of reform to date. So we look forward to seeing something positive, both for our passenger and our freight customers. But what have we been doing in terms of reform and preparing for that? What have we been working on? Well, 3 things I'd like to pick out amongst many. First of all, thinking about planning for the future. We set out something called the Whole Industry Strategic Plan, now rebadged as the long-term strategy for rail, with a 30-year perspective, a 30-year horizon, something that we really haven't had in the railways, well, since 1948 probably, or even before. So we have a perspective to look into the future, which gives us all a perspective which we can plan our investments around, sets our stall out, looks at a number of different things, not just investment, but also our operational plans for the future. And we've been working with partners in the room here and around the country to work out how to integrate the plans for the railways with the plans for local transport. And I think that's quite critical. The railways down the years, in my experience, have been quite an insular community, often planning railways in isolation to whatever else is happening in local environments and in local communities. And that has to change. That has to change to be more integrated, and not just the transport planners talking to the transport planners, but the railway also understanding what it means to work with local communities and regional partners. So we've been doing a lot of work in that space, talking to people in this room and wider mayoral combined authorities about what the railways of the future might look like. Secondly, we've been preparing for fares and ticketing reform. I don't need to tell you that the fragmentation of the industry and the piecemeal approach to fares and ticketing is something that drives people to distraction. And a lot of feedback that we've had through the engagement of this process has been to simplify and integrate fares and ticketing. Of course, people read simplification of fares and ticketing as cheaper fares. That may be the case, but is not the central thrust of what we want to do. One of the things we're looking at is how we can roll out the way that you access your fare and your ticket through contactless ticketing, and we've been doing a lot of work around the country working out how that will roll out in future. And thirdly, we've been thinking quite a lot about how regional partnerships will work in future. We have commissioned from the department to look at that specifically, how we will look to advise them on the future role of partnerships, those that exist today, how would we make them work in the future, but also deeper and wider than that, how would the railways of the future work more readily and transparently with regional partners, and we've been working on that area quite a lot too. But I just wanted to say briefly in the few minutes that I have what we think the shape of the railways of the future will be in 5 simple points. I hope they're simple. Anyway, so if asked today, what do we think the key tenets of the railways of the future would be? Well, we're saying this. First of all, we believe that the guiding mind, which was set out in the white paper in May last year, seems so long ago, but isn't actually quite very long ago at all, is central to the way the railways run in the future. That's not to say a controlling mind. That's not to say an egocentric mind. That's to say an accountable body for the decisions of all of the railways so that customers and stakeholders know exactly who to go to when needing a conversation about the railways. Secondly, we see a strong regionally led organisation. We do not see GBR as being a centrally led organisation, but the engine room of the delivery of the railways of the future will be around regions, and we see 5 strong regions being created when reform is introduced. We see affordability as critical to the future of the railway, and unless we see reform, and unless we see some things like, for example, the reintroduction of competition in our train operating companies and the way that we deliver our railways, then we'll not be able to deliver affordability in the same way as we hope. Fourthly, we'd like to introduce more local accountability. Like I said earlier, sometimes we've been a bit insular as railways, so we want to introduce regions that are very much looking at dialogues and conversations And not just having a strategy for rail, but having an integrated strategy with wider public transport integration up and down the country. We see that key for passenger and for freight. And finally, an open and transparent organisation. Open in the sense of allowing enterprise to come and continue in the industry with regards to open access operators. Open, of course, to third-party operators like Transport for London and others who have their own services, but also developing freight and making sure that there is a freight growth strategy which is owned by GBR and the partners in the industry to deliver growth in that space too. So we believe reform is imperative for our customers, our partners, and for all of our futures. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Right. Just checking with the back. Paul, we're going to cut a few minutes into break time, if that's okay with everyone. Just the thumbs up. Great stuff. Right. Just to set the scene from all three of you, we heard from Naomi and Richard earlier. How, in your own words, does the Heartland help you to deliver your ambitions? What would happen, Richard, to start with, if the Heartland organisation didn't exist?
So I think, the government's been really clear on the role of the Heartland and setting out those priorities for investment and setting out the case and evidence for investment. And I think for us, the work with EEH in terms of it being evidence-led, in terms of it representing the requirements of the geography, is really important. And actually, in our route strategies and in our initial report, we fed that evidence into our thinking. So they're playing an active role. You are playing an active role in shaping what we are doing as an organisation.
Okay. Beth?
I don't think East-West Rail would happen without it, because I think that the local authorities and the communities that have been pushing very, very hard to have this connectivity are making it come to reality. And I think that if it weren't for that intense lobbying over a very long period of time, I think it wouldn't be happening at all.
Okay, Jonathan, presumably East-West English Heartland doesn't overlaps with many of your regions, does it? I mean,
it does, but integration is the word I'd use, unless we've got the railways working with the local transport communities and with that multimodal focus, then the railways are in isolation and they're not going to deliver the benefit that we need.
Okay, let's talk about, Richard at the top says 60% of UK freight goes through this region. Richard, there's a question here. What plans does Great British Railways have to improve that ability to carry freight?
Well, we're clear that a long-term growth strategy is critical to the future of the railways, and we're very committed to freight as part of that. And having been involved in freight down many years with certain colleagues in the room, I'm certainly committed to that and how we deliver that together. And with places like Daventry and other rail terminals in this area, we've got a key terminal and key hub to distribute from. So important.
It's from Phil Smart, by the way. My screen jumped. There's so many questions coming. My screen's flying around the whole time, so apologies if I miss it. To Beth West, what part can East West Rail play in achieving rail freight growth?
It's an excellent question. I mean, I think it goes along with what John's been talking about in terms of having that 30-year strategy and making sure that understanding how rail freight could be used on East West Rail is really important, because it's not just, the thing of going from Oxford to Cambridge is there's no port in there. So it is about the connectivity to the wider network and making sure that those connections are happening if we're going to be putting freight onto East West Rail, because we could build loads of capacity and then not actually connect to ports and where the freight actually is coming from.
Okay. There's quite a few questions, Beth, about the fact that East West Rail is not electrified. What's the update on that? Why not?
It will be at the moment is planned to use diesel for the first bit that will be opening in 2025, which was quite frankly a surprise to me when I joined. So we are working very, very hard to make sure that our future development is going to be being very green. Now the question is how do we use the developing technology on batteries to not have electric lines go up, is that an option for us, and it's something that we're working very hard to assess at the moment. That will, again, deliver more cost effectiveness. It will have a less of an impact on the landscape, and we think that there's a real opportunity to bring in battery-operated trains that gets rid of the diesel option. But it is a top priority for me.
Okay. There's a question here, maybe, Sir Richard. Why is there a seemingly standalone road investment strategy and not a movement investment strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a broader question about integrated investment and how you do that and it's for government really. But I think what we're trying to do in terms of our investment plans is to think about where those opportunities are for integration through designated funds, through working with yourselves. We work with East West Rail in terms of our strategic project teams, thinking about how we can make sure there's complementary investment plans. But I think there is this wider discussion around a transport investment plan. So what is the transport and how is that integrated to make sure you do deal with end-to-end? And I think Naomi had a good slide about end-to-end and quality. So I think it's something definitely I think government's...
are you expecting in your RIS3 work, I think it was 13 billion out of the 24 was for managing the network rather than enhancing it. Do you expect that proportion to be, in RIS3, to be a lot more focused on managing the assets?
We'll find out tomorrow about the funding available, so I think we're all waiting that. But I think there is a need with an ageing asset, and I think all highway authorities and rail authorities have the issue about ageing assets, especially structures. Okay. So I think there may be an increased amount of funding towards that area as needed.
Ben Feeney North, I'll name check him because of the question. Will the establishment of GBR end the scourge of DFT micromanagement of the railway industry?
I don't recognise the question. I think what we need to do is to work much more locally and have decisions made as close to the customer as possible. I think that works. So that would be my answer to your question that I don't recognise.
Okay. One from Stuart discussed at lunch and coffee. Stuart Turner says, Beth, to what degree do you think your task is handicapped by not having a regional spatial strategy in place?
I think it's a good question. We could wait forever for something like that to be developed, and then it would probably be changing and going wrong. I think that it is what we need to be doing is looking at what is available, what is going on. I'm very keen to understand what all of our local communities' local plans are, because they're in various stages of their development as well, and making sure that we're integrating into that. But we've got to